almost every retirement plan is based on a single number, that is 4%. A few people may have heard of it, but almost nobody understands what's behind it. And those hidden assumptions could be the differences between a retirement that lasts and one that doesn't. So let's change that. Now, it's good to know the number 4%, but it's also very important to understand where does it come from. It was actually introduced only in 1994 by a former financial advisor called William Bengen. He kept receiving the same question over and over. I'm a retiree, I have some money in the bank for my pension plan. What is the maximum percentage I can withdraw from the bank for my pension actually to last 30 years or more? Bengen was, and still is, a very technical person. So he studied the financial markets, the treasury market, the bond markets, and he came out with this number, 4%, as the percentage of money you can withdraw in 1 year from your pension. And this 4% number obviously is not perfect, but it's definitely a number that changes the retirement planning forever. When I watch a YouTube video, I always like to have examples, because giving a rule or mathematical function is fine, but if you don't see a few numbers, you may actually get lost with it. So let's understand how much you can actually spend with your saving. Let's assume you have a saving of $500,000 in your bank that you want to use for your retirement. Well, just multiply that by 4%, and that comes down to $20,000 per year. And if you divide that by 12, roughly you come out with $1,600. That's the maximum amount that you can spend each and every month for the next 30 years, and you will be sure that you have an extremely good probability that your money is gonna last. And now, if you have $1 million in your saving, obviously multiply by 2, which means you're going to have about $3,300 every month for your expenses. And finally, if you start with a budget of just $250,000, you're going to have $800 that you can use for your expenses. And this formula can be used also the other way around, which means you know how much you spend in a month, and you want to understand what is going to be the saving that allows you to go in retirement without any issue. Well, it's very simple. If you think that you're going to spend around $2,000 per month, which means $24,000 per year, multiply that amount by 25 and you come out with an amount of $600. That's what you need to save in your bank before starting your retirement. And following the same rule, if you think you're going to spend around $4,000 each month, then just multiply that by 12, number of months per year, and then by 25. And you come out with 1.2 million. And if you spend $3,000, well, just in the middle, $900,000. So the rule should be quite clear by now. Divide it by 4 or multiply by 25 based on the results that you're looking for. So let's jump to the first important assumption. Your money, your saving, has to be invested. And when I say so, it doesn't mean that your money should be in a saving account making 2, 3 or 4%, which is, by the way, quite good, but not enough to satisfy the rule. Your money should be invested in the financial market for 50% of the amount, and the remaining 50% into the treasury or bond market. And with this kind of investment, usually the money makes at least 7% over the 30 years period. The second important thing is that the average inflation rate in the 30 years is 3%. And this is another crucial number. In fact, the 4% is based on the difference between the 7% return and the 3% inflation rate. Obviously, both numbers are based on the average over the 30 years, which means if in 1 year you make 10% return, but you have an inflation rate of 6%, you're going to end up with 4% anyway. I guess you get the point. You need always to have this relationship of 4%, that is the difference between a return from your investment and the inflation rate that you're going to experience in that year. And the last important point is that this retirement plan was designed for 65 years old people retiring for the next 30 years. So if you are 55 years old and you're thinking of using this 4% rule for your retirement, well, think again. But hold on, don't stop this video if you are 50 or 55 years old and you're thinking of early retirement, because further studies were made on this number in case you want to have an early retirement. And 4%, as I said, doesn't work, But what it works is a number that is usually between 3 and 3.5%. And I know this may not give much information, but let's go down to numbers as I usually like to do. Now, if you think you're going to spend $2,000 per month, therefore $24,000 per year, and then if you apply a rule of 4%, you multiply by 25, which is $600,000. That's the budget that you need for your retirement. But now, if you are only 55 to 50, you have to multiply by around 29 this time, which means you will need between $680,000 and $700,000. And now, if you think it back, the difference between 600 and 700, it's around only 50%. It's not that much. So early retirement is actually not a dream, it can be done. And you know one thing, the best time of retirement is the early stage of retirement, when you are much younger. And that's obviously because you will have a better mental health, a better physical health at 55 than you will have at 75. And I know at this point of this video probably you already started dreaming, but I have even better actually news, which I'm gonna give you after I tell you a little bit more of my story. I already mentioned in past videos that when I retired 10 years ago, I had only $50,000 in my bank, which if you make all of the calculation we talk about in this video, it means that I could spend only $166 a month, which is peanuts, honestly. So obviously I was well aware I couldn't make it. I have some more money in my retirement plan in the superannuation here in Australia, but I'm gonna be able to access that only once I am 60 years old. But I decided anyway to leave my 9-to-5 job just because of my mental health. And sometimes retirement is not only about money, but there are actually different reasons. And that's why from day one, since I left my 9-to-5 job, I decided to open or start what I call micro businesses and see what was working and what was not. The whole idea was to take down that amount of expenses I had in a month to a level I was absolutely comfortable with, possibly close to the $166 that come out from that 4% rule. And you know what? 10 years later, I can tell you I have succeeded. I had plenty of fun as well. My health is so much better and my level of satisfaction is so high and definitely not comparable to when I had my 9-to-5 job. But now, before jumping to the great news that banking gave us only a few years ago, let me give you some more numbers because that will give you more of an understanding of this 4% rule. Now, let's assume you start your pension plan with a budget of $1 million in your bank. So the first year, you will withdraw $40,000. The remaining amount of the money into the bank will make 7% at least as a return, which means the second year, instead of withdrawing $40,000, you're going to withdraw $41,000. That is exactly the same amount of money if you consider the inflation rate of that year, that is 3%. And now on the second year, you're going to withdraw $42,000 because your capital has actually increased by 7% once again. And I could keep going for the next 30 years. So you see how your withdrawal is actually increasing based on the inflation rate, and that's what you want. And now here is the good news you were waiting for. Well, William Bengen further studied this formula. At the end of the day, he created that in 1994. Actually, William Bengen is now 78 years old. And what he understood is that this 4% rule is actually not the best. And probably 5% applies better, which means instead of withdrawing 4% every single year, you can now more safely withdraw 5%. And further on, he actually noticed that a few people follow this rule but went up to 7% per year, and they're still good, no worries at all. And for very good reason, because as we get older, actually we spend less money. We don't go on holiday every single year. We spend less with food, we spend less probably with the house as well because we downgrade, and many other expenses that usually go down. So the 4% rule is actually more of a 5% rule. But this means also that if you are 50 or 55 years old and you're thinking of retirement earlier, then you can use probably a 4% as a safer bet for your retirement withdrawing. And if you find this video very useful up to now, well, why not subscribing, putting a like, writing a comment, and more importantly, starting actioning your pension. How? By calculating your expenses. But let me tell you a little bit more, which is very important when you calculate your expenses. So the first thing I did once I decided to retire from a 9-to-5 job was to calculate my expenses. And I learned so much that I want to share now, because it's so important to do it the right way. So first of all, you should calculate your expenses based on the previous 3 to 6 or even 12 months. Because it's not only about the monthly expenses, which could be maybe the rent, could be the utilities, could be the supermarket, but there are also extraordinary expenses. Maybe you fix the car, or maybe you fix the house. So you see, these are the expenses that can make or break your retirement plan. And once you make all of these calculations, then you take this number, let's say the expenses in 12 months, and you divide it by 12, of course, and you see what is your budget and where you should start with. But is this number actually correct? Well, it's not. Why not? Because there are work-related expenses that you should take away. At the end of the day, you don't work anymore, so what's the point to keep considering, for example, the commuting expenses? This could be the tram, the subway, whatever transportation you take actually to work. And this should exclude also the working clothes. If you have working clothes, it should exclude, for example, the coffees. It should exclude the lunch that you have at work. It should exclude possibly the drinks that you have after work. And you know what? I did this calculation. I was absolutely astonished to see such a big amount. Maybe it's just me, and put in the comment once you have calculated what is your amount. But my amount was $1,500 a month. And to make a comparison, let's go down to numbers. Now, you make your calculation and your expenses are $5,000 a month. Therefore, this means with the rule of 25 times, on the yearly basis, of course, you're gonna need $1.5 million if you use the 4% rule. If you want to be more conservative, use the 3.5%. You're probably gonna end up with $1.7 million. Now, you check actually your expenses and you find out that you have $1,000 of work-related expenses. Now, if you remake all of the calculation, you won't need any more $1.5 million, but you will need $1.2 million if you use the 4% rule, or you will need $1.3 million if you use the 3.5% rule, which basically means you need $300,000 less just by calculating the right way your expenses. So it's very important that you go through your numbers, and it will be absolutely beneficial to everyone if you put in the comment the difference, just in percentage of before and after your expenses. And with all these numbers, I really hope I haven't confused you even more than before. And in any case, if you have any further questions, please leave a comment down, because I usually answer in no time. And by the way, my name is Steph, and we arrive at the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.